The Duggar docuseries is airing next week, and in preparation for the premiere, I'm reviewing all of the information I've gathered about the Holt family. Kaylee Holt first appeared on the Duggars family TLC special, 16 Children and Moving In. It was a precursor to 19 Kids and Counting, and her name eventually made the social media rounds because of rumors swirling around in the IBLP. Kaylee's role in Josh Duggar's life was confirmed when her mother, Bobby Holt, testified at Josh Duggar's SA trial in December of 2021. Allegedly, Josh Duggar and Kaylee Holt started dating with a quote-unquote purpose when they were around the age of 14, as sanctioned by their parents and their community church. But allegedly, their relationship went sour due to Josh Duggar's inappropriate behaviors. But there's still so much more to know about Kaylee and her role in the Duggars' lives. Much like the Duggar sisters, Kaylee is an innocent victim in all of Josh Duggar's horrible behaviors. The following is a compilation of the videos I made following Josh Duggar's conviction, talking about Kaylee's role in the Duggars' lives. I'm on a quest to understand as much as I can about what happened to Josh and his sisters, who was involved in covering it up, and what role did the IBLP play in all of this. Recently, the Duggar sisters, specifically Jill, Jessa, and Ginger, filed a lawsuit against Springdale about the release of their identities as victims of Josh Duggar. Legal documents and depositions were just released from the court, and shockingly, Kaylee Holt, the daughter of Jim and Bobby Holt, Josh Duggar's allegedly betrothed girlfriend, was deposed in the suit against Springdale. Many others were also deposed, and the documents confirm much information about the Duggar family and what happened many years ago. Tonight, I'm going to share with you Kaylee Holt's deposition. The Holt family is a fundamentalist Christian family who were close with the Duggar family in the late 90s and early 2000s. Jim Holt is a former member of the Arkansas House of Representatives and the state Senate. Jim Bob and Josh Duggar were active in Jim Holt's campaigns and political career. This past December, the matriarch of the Holt family testified against Josh Duggar at his CP trial. You can find all the information you need about her testimony if you check out my other video about the Holts. When the Holt's daughter Kaylee was 14 years old, Josh Duggar and Kaylee, quote-unquote, dated with a purpose, as Bobby Holt would later call it during Josh's trial. After Kaylee's mother testified in December, Kaylee took to Instagram to say this: "I try to keep parts of my past more private and just talk about my life now. But I feel like what's been happening in the last week or so has kind of forced me to say things and talk about it. Many of you who are on here know that my family grew up with the Duggars and we were inseparable at one point. Many of you know about my past relationship, and that didn't really get talked about. It was kept quiet for most of my life until recently." On the stand, Bobby Holt testified that she hoped her daughter and Josh were going to get married, but the parents decided to call off the courtship after learning about Josh's issues with his sisters. Kaylee and Josh, who were born 2 days apart, dated long before Josh became interested in his now wife, Anna. I really feel for Kaylee, and I'm only going to show you a few older pictures of her here in my video. But unfortunately, she was called and deposed in Jill and Jessa's recent court battle, and I need to bring the information about what she said to the table so that we can continue to work with as much knowledge as possible of the truth about what happened with Josh Duggar. This deposition is long, so I will be skipping certain parts of it. Lawyer: I wanted to ask you, Ms. Tull, have you done anything else to prepare for the deposition today? Kaylee: What do you mean by prepare? Lawyer: Have you read anything to refresh your memory about anything, or have you spoken to anyone to help you remember? Kaylee: I did go through some of my old journals because I was journaling at the time, but not very much. I just barely glanced at it for a date reference. Lawyer. It's funny that you said at the time, and so I was going to say, so when you say at the time, I think you mean at the time you learned about the incident in the Duggar family. Around that time? Kaylee. Yes. Lawyer. Okay, besides reviewing your journals, have you had a chance to speak with anybody about the incident from that time? Kaylee. I spoke to my parents, mostly because they had my journals, and I needed to get that from them so that it was in my possession before this call. Lawyer. Anybody else besides your folks that you've had a chance to talk about anything prior to your deposition? Kaylee. I'm trying to think. I know my husband and I talked a little bit, mostly just trying to refresh my memory, prepare for questions, and emotionally prepare for things that I may not be aware that are still painful. But we did. We did mostly just say we probably shouldn't speak about this with anybody but our attorney, just to keep things safe. So we let people know. We let two of our friends know who are married to pray for us that this deposition was coming up. But I don't think we actually discussed any details about that time with them, but we did mention that we had it coming and that they would pray for us. Lawyer. May I assume that these married friends were not people who were involved in the incident and just people you are in touch with now? Kaylee. That is correct. Lawyer. And this of course involves the Duggar family. Let's just say in the last month, even prior to getting the subpoena for us talking, did you have the occasion to speak to anyone in the Duggar family? And I mean the Duggars and the plaintiffs who were formally named Duggar: Jill, Jessa, Joy, and Ginger. Kaylee. Do you mean when I got the subpoena? Lawyer. No, just in the last month or so, like September or August. Kaylee. It has been recently, but I don't remember if it's been in September or not. Lawyer. Which of the sisters are you closer to? Kaylee. I'm still in contact with Jessa and Jill. Lawyer. Okay. And have you had the occasion to talk to Jessa or Jill about this deposition process? Kaylee. No, we thought it best not to speak with them about it. Lawyer. So I'm going to try to move as quickly as I can because I know you are busy there at home. Going back to when you were younger, how did you get to know the Duggar family? Kaylee. Our dads, Jim Bob and my father, Jim Holt, were best friends growing up. They have known each other since they were 12, and I grew up with them myself. Lawyer. Did you have the occasion to visit their home and vice versa? Did they visit you all's home? Kaylee. Correct. They did and vice versa. Lawyer. Okay. So this would be since you were a young child, is that correct? Kaylee. That's correct. Kaylee. I'm the oldest. I'm firstborn. Lawyer. Okay. And I believe is the oldest of the Duggars' children Jana? Kaylee. The older is Joshua. Lawyer. Joshua? Oh, Josh, forgive me. And then it's Jana and her twin after that? Kaylee. That's correct. Would it be accurate to assume that of your brothers and sisters and the Duggars' brothers and sisters, several of the kids are sort of the same age or around the same age? Kaylee. Yes, that is safe to assume. Lawyer. Okay, so as you were growing up, did your family attend church with the Duggar family? Kaylee. Church, as in we got together to worship the Lord, yes. We didn't actually go to a building that had a pastor that was an official denomination or congregation that was under a pastor. We did not go to church with them in that context. But we did call it church, what we did, which was to go to their home or them to our home and other families that we knew, and we would talk about the Lord and pray and sing and attempt to have church. Lawyer. Currently, when you and your husband and your family attend church, do you attend church in more like in a building with the pastor and with an organized congregation? Kaylee. Yes, sir. Lawyer. And back then, when you were having those, would it be accurate to call them services or fellowship? Kaylee. Gatherings. Lawyer. Gatherings. Okay. Was your family, the Holt family, also going to a more conventional church, a church with a pastor and a congregation, or was that just the worship that y'all had? Kaylee, we were not attending another church at that time. Lawyer, do you recall the Bates going to services, gatherings with you all? Kaylee, not at the time that I was there. Lawyer, okay, so that was after you were there? Kaylee, we knew the Bates, but we did not attend the same church with them because they lived in a different state. So then they go on to talk about the different families that were at the church, and Kaylee names the Butcher family, the Baker family, the Nichols family, the Millsap family, the Andrig family, and the Fedowskis, which we've talked about before on this channel. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit more here and go right into some questions about Josh. Lawyer. So honing in on a time that we can mark, I'd like to talk to you about the time that you learned, if you did learn, that there had been an incident in the Duggar family where Josh, the oldest, had SM'd his sisters and possibly others. Do you recall becoming aware of that? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, okay, and do you recall about when that was? Kaylee, I know. It was March 30th of 2003. Lawyer, what was the occasion that you would have learned this information? Kaylee, that's a hard answer. I was in a romantic relationship with Josh at that time, and my parents told me what had happened because an incident had happened again. So my parents became aware, and then they told me because they felt it was best that the relationship should end for the time being because of what was going on in their family. Lawyer, may I say first, Miss Holt, I take absolutely no pleasure in talking about things that are difficult, and I will do so as quickly and efficiently as we can. But I want you to know that if you want to take a break anytime, I hope you will just say, hey, can I take a break? And then Kaylee says, I will, thank you. The lawyer says, yes, ma'am. So it's interesting that you said it had happened again, so this makes me think that it happened before. Maybe it had stopped and it happened again. Is that your understanding? Kaylee, that was my understanding, yes. Lawyer, and my understanding is that you can tell me if I'm wrong, that when you were in a relationship with Josh, that would be, do you call it courting? Kaylee, courting, she asks as a question. Lawyer, yes. Kaylee, well, at the time, we called it betrothal. Lawyer, okay. Kaylee, but yes, technically. Lawyer, all right. And then my understanding is that the betrothal would be approved by both Josh's father and your father. Is that? And Kaylee breaks in and says, and our mothers. The lawyer says, and your mothers. Okay, fair enough. And on March 30th, when you were told, did the betrothal, did it go on hiatus? Did it stop? Kaylee, I believe at the time they thought that it was over, but with potential to work things out in the future. So kind of maybe on hold is how you would say that. Lawyer, okay, did it ever get restarted again, the betrothal? Kaylee, no. Lawyer, did your parents take that occasion to discuss with you sort of what happened and what had happened in the Duggar family? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, do you know if they discussed those things with any of your brothers and sisters as well? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, okay. And did they talk about safety and being safe in situations to avoid if that ever happened to any of you? Kaylee, yes, they did. Lawyer, okay. Do you recall any of the sort of admonishments or advice or sort of instructions they gave you all to avoid a situation like that? Kaylee, yes. I feel like it had been kind of a very open conversation with our family after that happened. We talked about accountability, so having open communication with people that we trust if an incident ever felt, if we ever felt, first of all, threatened or we were violated. And then to go to someone that we trusted and talk about it, because that would be a safe place. And then if we ever saw anything with someone else, to talk about it so that they would be in a safer place also. Lawyer, and did you have a perception of how that situation was handled in the Duggar family? Kaylee, did I have a perception of how what was handled? Lawyer, did you know what they had done within the family to handle their situation?
Kaylee, I don't know exactly how they talked to their children about it, but I do know that some steps they took to deal with it. Lawyer, and what are those that you remember? Kaylee, my dad was a chaplain at a juvenile offender facility prior to this happening, and my dad heavily encouraged Jim Bob and Josh to turn themselves into the police, and he eventually persuaded them. And they went on April 9th, 2003 to a police officer to confess what he had done, so I know they took that measure. They also sent Josh out of the home from probably March 31st because I think they left the next day after I found out. So around March 31st, 2003 to July 18th of 2003, so a few months. Lawyer, do you know to whom I guess Josh's father, Mr. Duggar, took Josh? Kaylee, the police officer? Lawyer, yes. Kaylee, I don't know his name. Lawyer, it is my understanding that at some point, I don't know if this is the same occasion, Mr. Duggar took Josh to a state trooper named Hutchins. Does that ring a bell at all? Kaylee, I know they took him to a state trooper, but I don't remember his name. Lawyer, were you told what happened or what occurred in that visit between the trooper, Mr. Duggar, and Josh Duggar? Kaylee, Josh did not tell me, and I don't believe Jim Bob told me either. I think it was my dad who told me that the police officer was, well, thank you for coming to us and talking about it, and we trust that you won't ever do it again, and they let him leave, and that's my understanding of how it went. Lawyer, and to your knowledge, did the trooper ever make a report as a mandatory reporter to the Arkansas, hotline? Did he call the hotline? Kaylee, as far as I know, he did not communicate this to anyone else. Lawyer, okay. Did you have the occasion to talk to any of his sisters who would have been victims about what they did afterwards? Kaylee, you mean how they were handled emotionally? Lawyer, sure, yes. Kaylee, I know they had a lot of conversations with their parents. I spoke to them briefly, mostly in a comforting way, not for counseling, just because we were friends, and I was 15 at the time. I don't recall any specific conversations that we had. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not real helpful. Lawyer, that's fine. Do you know if any of them sought help, more professionally with a counselor or a physician? Kaylee, while we were hanging out with them, they did not. Lawyer, okay. Since then, have you had the occasion to discuss with any of them what they have done to work through their feelings or to deal with the trauma? Kaylee, I have talked to Jill. Lawyer, and can you recall her ever telling you that she sought help, professional help? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, she did? Kaylee, yes. I believe it was after they were married, her and Derek. Lawyer, oh, she did? Kaylee, uh-huh. Lawyer, have you ever talked to any of the sisters about anything else, any of the other sisters? Kaylee, no, I have lost contact with Ginger and Joy. Lawyer, okay. Kaylee, and Jana. After you put the betrothal on hold, did your families continue to have the same kind of relationship they had prior? Kaylee, no. Lawyer, okay, can you describe what happened to the relationship between the families? Kaylee, I'm trying to figure out a good way to say it without giving you a lot of the story. Well, simply put, after what happened with Josh, there was a lot of distrust between our families and our communication with each other. We still went to the same church gathering, family gatherings, whatever you want to call it, and we did for several years, but the relationship was always strained. It never went back to where it was before. Lawyer, do you recall any of the gatherings, this incident, or the incident being discussed, brought up in any way at a gathering? Kaylee, not amongst the children. I do know that the fathers got together and talked about it, but the children didn't talk about it. Lawyer, do you recall Josh ever going forward or coming forward to, if not the children, to the other attendees of the gathering, the parents? Kaylee, I do. I know that he did attend some of those meetings, yes. And so here I think Kaylee's talking about Josh standing up in church and talking about what he did. Lawyer, did he tell you about those, or did your dad tell you about those? Kaylee, I know he told me some of them. I'm trying to remember some things because I know, like, timeline of events, but I can't remember for sure who told me what when it came to Josh or my dad, because there were times that Josh would tell me things. Kaylee, I think it was because I was romantically involved that you remember these kinds of things. Kaylee, he went away for a few months, March, I think, 31st or something, whichever it was that year, I don't remember. It was April 1st, or if it was March, whichever one of those days, it was because I found out about it on March 30th. And he said it happened that same night or the night before, something like that. And there was a day or two where my family was traveling, and they ended up telling me very soon after the incident had happened. And then Josh left and he went out of town. Jim Bob took him to a facility in Little Rock, and he wanted him to come back for his birthday on July 18th. So we drove down and got him and brought him back, and that's how I remember those days. Lawyer, so the times that Josh would go to speak with the older people, the parents at least, at these gatherings, was that before he went to Little Rock until July 18th, or was that July 18th after he came back? Kaylee, it was after. As far as I know, my dad is the only person that knew. Well, there was one other family that knew during that time that he was away. Lawyer, that he was in Little Rock? Kaylee, right. Lawyer, when Josh did describe for you what was happening when he would meet with the older people, the parents, what did he describe? Kaylee, that they got on to him, they gave him wise advice, that they encouraged him to be a better man, and that he would confess his transgressions with them. Lawyer, were you ever aware that Josh was compelled to cut his hair after he had confessed to them? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, was that something that was done at one of the gatherings, or was that done with just the older people with him? Kaylee, I believe it was done privately, actually. I think he was alone. Lawyer, oh, okay. And was that after he came back in July of 2003? Kaylee, that was a different year entirely. Like I said, it was quiet for probably 2 years, and then they got turned into DHS from the Oprah Winfrey Show, I believe, and then it became far more well-known at that point. But I think that may have been in 2006 or 2005 when Josh shaved his head. I didn't go over those dates, so I can't give you a specific one. Lawyer, were you still as in close touch with any of the Duggars or Josh at that time in 2005 or 2006 when he shaved his head? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, okay, were you mostly more in touch with Jill or Joy, or were there others in the family? Kaylee, no, I was actually more in touch with Jim Bob and Michelle at that time. We were still in family gatherings with them, but I haven't had as close of contact with the girls at that time until more recently as we've become adults. We were friends as kids, but we didn't actually talk to each other about things that had happened when we were children, not specifics or details. I talked far more with Jim Bob and Michelle than the girls. Lawyer, what was the nature of that relationship? Was it family friends, or were they counseling you, or was that, could you describe that relationship between you, Jim Bob, and Michelle, let's say after July of 2003? Kaylee, I had expected to marry their son, and they had expected me to be their daughter-in-law. And this was a lot of heartache that happened for me when I was especially that young. So I think that we had a lot of conversations, mostly to see how I was doing and to see how Josh was doing. And so I guess still kind of like in-law relationship in a way. But we just cared about each other, friends as well as that, parental-daughter relationship. Lawyer, how old were you in July of 2003? Kaylee, I was 15. Lawyer, okay, is it fair to say that there was still some hope amongst Jim Bob and Michelle that the betrothal would be able to continue and y'all would be able to get married? Kaylee, at the time, yes. Lawyer, you had a time in your mind when that issue was closed for you, in your mind and theirs as well? Kaylee: I'm not sure about them. I came to that conclusion much sooner. I believe I was 17, maybe 18, and I had had just enough of the issues that were happening, and Josh made a comment to me about that, made me feel like he took advantage of my feelings for him, and it made me aware that I felt really used emotionally, and I was just done. But I do recall that, and I think I just shut myself off emotionally to them after that. I just kind of knew that it was never going to happen, and I didn't want it to happen anymore. So yeah. Lawyer: Mrs. Tull, you mentioned that there was an incident. Was there a thing that sort of brought that understanding that you had came to, or was there a conversation that you had with Josh? Kaylee: There was something that happened. Lawyer: And may I ask? Kaylee: Josh was still looking at P and was lying about it, and it was more the lies that I was done with. I understand it, people look at P and people are okay with doing that. But for us in our relationship, it wasn't, and I was not okay with being lied to about it. And I think that I couldn't trust him anymore, and that I also felt taken advantage of. The combination of that made me feel like it was just resolved in my heart. Lawyer: I'm assuming you were still living at home at this time. Kaylee: My whole family was actually living in Little Rock at this time. Lawyer: Okay, but you stayed in Northwest Arkansas? Kaylee: No, actually Josh was there with us. Lawyer: In Little Rock? Kaylee: Yes. He stayed in a different... I'm sorry. Lawyer: Please, I'm so sorry that I interrupted. Kaylee: Oh, he stayed in another, like a dorm room, a room that another family was loaning him. But he came down to Little Rock with us to help out my dad while he was in the legislature. Lawyer: Oh, right. But did he come to Little Rock from his family home, or had he moved out of his family home by then? Kaylee: He was temporarily living there, so he fully intended to go back with his family at the time. Lawyer: Gotcha. And when you had this sort of revelation and realization, was it Josh who told you that what he had been doing, or did someone else tell you, or did you discover in some other way? Kaylee: He told my parents first, and then he told me also. Lawyer: Do you think he had been found out by someone else and compelled to tell them, or did something else bring him to tell them? Kaylee: I don't remember if he got caught or not in that specific instance. I know he had a pretty open relationship, accountability relationship with my dad at that point, with both of my parents too, but I don't remember if he willingly confessed or not. So now the lawyer asks, so tell me what you mean by that it became more well known. And when I say it, I mean the occurrence of inappropriate behavior by Josh. Kaylee: I wrote a letter to an author kind of getting my emotions out. It was more like a journal page, but just so happened to be to the author of a book I was reading at the time. And I guess I put it back in the book. I don't remember doing this, but I put it back in the book, and I put it back. I put the book on my shelf from the first initial 2003 event. And so it had been in there for many years. And then I lent the books out to a friend in 2006, not remembering that the letter was in there. And when that letter was discovered, the girl that I had lent it to told her parents, and her parents told other parents, and then there was a whole group of people that knew about it at the time, and they kind of just left the family church gathering. And then some people kind of pursued them, like, hey, we miss you, what's going on, why haven't you been coming? And then people kind of kept talking about it, about what had happened, and it was all around that same time. I can't remember if Oprah alerted the hotline or if a private person alerted Oprah. I can't remember for sure how that happened, but I do know that they turned in on information that was going around in the church at the time, and it became, I'm pretty sure everyone that was going at the time knew. So basically Kaylee's saying that things got out in the church and everybody knew what had gone on with Josh. Lawyer: May I ask if you recall the name of the friend who you loaned this series to? And then Kaylee gives the name, but I'm not going to say it here. Lawyer, do you recall what you wrote that would cause people to, talk about it and talk to each other about it, and then eventually somebody would report it to the Oprah show? Kaylee, yeah, I wrote his name. I did. I wrote that Josh had done something inappropriate to his sisters. Lawyer, and did you ask anyone to get the letter back? Did anyone ever offer to give the letter back to you? Kaylee, I did. I asked for it back. So basically she goes on to talk about the person she gave the letter to. I'm not going to name that person. She says she asked for the letter back and that the parents of her friend said that they burned the letter. Kaylee, I'm not sure if that's true, but that's what I was told. And she basically goes on to say that this family was a newer family in the church. Lawyer, did this information, once it went through the families knew at the gatherings, did it change the nature of those gatherings of the service? Kaylee, it did. Lawyer, can you describe that, how it changed? Kaylee, there was basically 3 groups of people. Because the Duggars were turned in at that time when information come out, there was basically 3 groups of people. People that felt like they should not have been turned in, people that felt like they should have been, and then the group of people who wanted to stay out of it entirely. And so it kind of split from there. Lawyer, and did that cause a splintering of the group itself, and did they continue to meet together? Kaylee, no, it was several families. I don't think I've even seen again ever, so it was definitely permanent. Some people have kind of come back around, and especially the people that stayed out of it kind of came back around and fellowshipped with either side, but it took time. It definitely wasn't an immediate thing. We were pretty separate for a while. Lawyer, eventually they were turned in. The hotline was called. Do you know who did that? Who called the hotline? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, who was it? And basically, Kaylee goes on to say the name of another person, and she says that she attended the church as well. Lawyer, and Mrs. Holt, were there people who blamed you for that? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, and how did they express that? And here it seems that Kaylee begins to cry. So the lawyer, goes ahead and tells her they can have a recess and have a little bit of a break for about 20 minutes, and we'll come back after that. And then they take a break. Lawyer, just taking a break. Thank you, Kaylee, for that. And as we left off, we were talking about the kind of effect on the families in the gathering and sort of the spreading of the knowledge of, the incident in the Duggar family. Kaylee, yeah, you asked if they blamed me. Lawyer, yes, ma'am. Did you want to respond to that? Kaylee, I answered yes earlier, which is what made me cry, but that's fine. Lawyer, let me ask it this way. Who expressed that to you? Kaylee, I know I had a conversation with Jim Bob and Michelle about it, and there were some other families that were pretty upset about that also. Oh, I remembered another family that was attending, and then she goes on to name that family. She also goes on to talk about which families stayed with the Duggars and which families left the church. Lawyer, did any of the Duggar girls ever tell you that they were instructed not to talk about the incident to anyone by their parents? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, was there ever an occasion where the young people who attended the services, the gatherings, were instructed by their parents not to talk about the incident with Josh and the Duggars? Kaylee, I know that, and then she names a family. I know that this family's children were told not to talk about it, and the Duggar children were told not to talk about it, and another family's children were told not to talk about it. But I don't know anyone else, whether they were or not. Question, was there ever the occasion in those gatherings or at any other times that the families were together where you all would discuss it amongst yourselves? Kaylee, as far as I know, I talked about it with Jim Bob and Michelle, and I believe some other girls talked to Jim Bob and Michelle. There may have been an occasion or two that I believe I remember talking to some of the moms, particularly, and then she names another family's moms. I talked to the adults more than I talked to the children just because I was more encouraged from a place of the adults were the people to talk about it, not the children. Then my aunt and uncle, I also spoke to them. Lawyer, did you ever feel compelled to report the incident to anyone or talk to anyone about it outside of your mom and dad? Kaylee, I didn't feel the need to report it because I thought that's what happened with the state trooper. I thought it was done. It was done with. At the time, I didn't know, that it really wasn't dealt with properly. But at the time, I felt like it was, so I thought it was all handled. Lawyer, have you ever been made aware that he is in prison now, that state trooper? Kaylee, yes, I believe on CP charges, actually.
Here, Kaylee's going to talk about how her parents were accused of reporting what happened with Josh to the Oprah show.
Kaylee, I'm trying to figure out how to tell it without making it longer than necessary. Jim Bob believed that my parents were responsible for it happening, and I know that they were confronted by Jim Bob and Michelle about that. Lawyer, and so did your parents tell you that the theory or the reason that the Duggars felt the way it was expressed to them? Kaylee, yes. Lawyer, what was that? Kaylee, that my dad was jealous of Jim Bob, or that he was trying to get back at him for what Josh had done to me. Lawyer, what did they accuse your mom and dad of to end the show? Kaylee, they accused them of setting up the person that was responsible for calling Oprah and getting the information out. Lawyer, there has been testimony that Josh was inappropriate with his sisters and someone else, a babysitter. Are you aware of any other instances other than those 5? Kaylee, Josh told me personally of the incidences. Lawyer, so of those 5 persons, Kaylee, of those 5 persons, and about how many times? Lawyer, and did he tell you about any other persons besides those 5? Kaylee, no. Lawyer, have you ever been told of other victims besides from Josh? Kaylee, no. I mean, Jim Bob and Michelle, my parents, talk candidly with me about those things, but they've not given me any more victims other than those 5. Lawyer, have you ever been contacted by any of those for information? Kaylee, I've been contacted by tabloids. Lawyer, and do you respond to those or do you decline to speak to them? Kaylee, some of them I've not responded to at all, as in like I delete the message or ignore the message. Some of them, like specifically phone calls that I have gotten and been aware of who they are, I've just told them I was uninterested. It's definitely not something I want to be known for in my life. That's so sad. I feel really bad for Kaylee.
Congratulations to those of you who made it all the way to the end. That was a long testimony. It's really sad to hear about what Kaylee went through as a child. And unfortunately, the way that her parents and the way that the Duggar parents chose to raise these children certainly contributed to all of the shame and perhaps even contributed to the inappropriate behavior Josh chose to participate in. It's unfortunate that Josh kept coming back into Kaylee's life. That must have been very confusing for her. I do think that Kaylee's testimony confirms everything we've been hearing about the Duggars. For a long time, I believed it was just rumors. And once it became obvious that something was going on, I felt like the rumors were still exaggerated. But Kaylee confirms that so much of what we had been hearing behind the scenes about the Duggars and what was going on with Josh is true.